Good morning. Welcome back to Entrepreneur Country TV, edition 20, Deja. I'm here to introduce Ed Bussey of Quill to you in just a moment. But first, I wanted to just look at that announcement of Amazon working with Morrisons that happened in the past week here in the United Kingdom. Now, you remember the first version of the future that I spoke about a couple weeks ago is that the digital platform companies, the Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, GAFA, digital platform companies are intent on taking over every industry. And they're winning to the tune of near $1 trillion market caps and exponential growth right now because of ecosystem economics applied to them. But what we're rooting for in Entrepreneur Country is for that third version of the future, where David and Goliath dance, where the digital enablers, the enabling technology companies work with the Morrisons and the banks and the telcos and the transportation companies to unlock new digital revenues, with consumer data being a new entrant to that business model, because we believe that there's a better distribution, a more sustainable set of economics, but an ecosystem economics principle which applies. We have more than 100 applications for the Build a Country Challenge focused on the smart home at this time. And we're keeping the application process open until the end of this week. So if you'd like to be considered for that £250,000 investment from the Ariadne Capital Entrepreneurs Fund this week, submit your application. We've got digital Davids that are coming at the smart home from all sorts of different angles from all over the world, not just Britain, not just Europe. And you'll remember that the Build a Country Challenge, which is focused on the smart home right now, is just the beginning of our focus and our building of the ecosystem of the smart home. And the way that we do that in Entrepreneur Country is that we bring the Goliaths from the sector, the utility companies, the property companies, home retail, telecommunications, etc., along with those digital Davids to create an app economy on top of platform companies that can together create ecosystem economics in that sector. We'll continue to do that long after the Build a Country Challenge comes to a head at the Entrepreneur Country Forum, which is always oversubscribed. So please buy your ticket for the 19th of April Entrepreneur Country Forum today. During 15 years of building Ariadne Capital, 350 million pounds of transactions and investments, the one thing which remains constant is our long-term relationships with entrepreneurs. And I'm so pleased to introduce to you this morning Ed Bussey, one of those entrepreneurs that we've backed through the Ariadne Capital Entrepreneurs Fund. But I've known Ed for many years. I knew him when he was running Fig Leaves, which was sold to N. Brown, and then Zib, which was sold to Vodafone. And the thing that makes Ed backable is that he's gone through that entire cycle of building companies, managing all of the different people, partners, investors, etc., that you have to do when you build a business. Ariadne Capital was having discussions with Ed, as we do with so many entrepreneurs, and it became clear that we could come in with £500,000. And even though he had great investment from high net worth individuals and leading entrepreneurs from all sorts of backgrounds who could add value, there was a role for Ariadne's fund to play to put in what we refer to as our positive architecture. And that means that we look at the corporate architecture and says, does this architecture enable a big building to stand on top of it? So we put in gentle preference shares and appropriate investor rights, and we look at the board structure, and we create a solid foundation to that business. But then we continue by being the confidant to the CEO and the entrepreneur and helping him or her with their go-to-market strategy, something that I'm going to be spending more time on next week. So we set up companies correctly with entrepreneurs, we help them go to market, and we stick with them as they have their near-death experiences until they get through to the breakthrough moments. It's with enormous pleasure and pride that I introduce to you Ed Bussey, the CEO and founder of Quill.
My first digital business was figleaves.com, where I was part of the founding team and head of marketing. We built the business up here and in the US and were acquired by N. Brown, the catalog retailers. The second startup I was involved in was a company called Zib, ZYB, which was one of the first generation of mobile app development businesses. Was the COO there, and we were acquired by Vodafone in 2008. In the early days of building internet retail businesses like Figleys. I think many of us were very focused on the technology and the systems that underpinned the retail experience. And there's one bit of customer feedback that stuck in my mind from the latter Figleys days, which is shopping at Figleys is like shopping at Oracle. And I think it took us some time to understand what this customer meant, but it was actually very insightful. We'd spent a lot of time building the technology, but we hadn't really optimized the front-end consumer experience of the website. It became apparent that not just Figleys, that pretty much every single e-commerce business during the 2000s was building its business without content at the core of what it was doing. And I think as an industry, we were quite late in recognizing that. And that, in essence, was the genesis of Quill. We help e-commerce businesses, particularly, mainly retail, but not just retail, use content to drive sales. We specialize in what we call primary content, which is the content at the penultimate stage of the purchase funnel, right at the point where consumers are browsing for products, content that converts them from browsing into buying. So it could be the product descriptions or the category descriptions. It could be a hotel review or a destination guide. It could be a description of an insurance product or the importance of insurance. We'll produce somewhere in the region of 12 to 15 million words of content over the course of the next 12 months, at least 27 languages, and across a breadth of topics that would have been unimaginable in a traditional agency or a traditional production environment. Content production is very rarely a core competence for a retail business, particularly, some of our clients, we might have 100 to 200 writers deployed on them across multiple languages, and the systems and processes needed to do that efficiently are extremely specialist. That's what we do every single day. We also see best-in-class approaches across the industry. To try to replicate that in-house is very difficult, very expensive, and leaves you with a big fixed cost on your P&L. We're saying that model is broken, and we're seeing it across the board, where pure play internet businesses who've been able to build themselves much more flexibly with modules of the best software solutions like Quill plugged in, giving them much more efficient basis for scaling than businesses that are trying to build out big headcounts, big teams, hard to manage, hard to retain, and lacking the software and the technology to help manage that sort of infrastructure efficiently.
So I hope you enjoyed listening to Ed this morning. We'll be hearing more about those stages of company development next week. Thank you for getting your ticket for the Entrepreneur Country Forum on the 19th of April, and for applying for that Smart Home Challenge if you're interested in that £250,000 of investment by the Ariadne Fund this week. Thank you for sharing this with your network, for watching it on podcast. I'll see you next week.